This is incredible. The biggest gift from the moose is in this bag. This is the last bit of moose lard right here. It's pure fluffy white. Oh my goodness. Pure fluffy white. Hey guys, it's Timber, and I'm here to start catching you up on episodes 11 and 12. These final wrap-up episodes, this huge finale, 3-hour-long finale that we had for Alone Season 11. I'm not going to give any spoiler alert because it's all been spoiled. So we're just going to get pretty much right into it. It's taken me a few days to look at it and then back up to process it a bit. But I'm ready to start catching you guys up. There's a lot of questions. I'm getting a lot of questions. Even though the show is edited really well, I think there's still a lot of gaps, a lot of things that just can't be presented. And that's what I'm here to catch you guys up on. So I'm going to start today by answering some questions. I have a list of 10 questions. I'm going to hit those first. And slowly I'll try to answer all your questions. But after I hit those 10 questions, I'm going to just do a few little special things. I brought some props along to help me answer some of those questions about this episode. I'm going to go ahead and start on this. This is moose jerky right here. And I still have a stash of it. I'm eating it. I love it. I'm rationing it. My teeth are okay. I just savor the flavor of that alder smoke, and it brings me right back to my camp. And yeah. It's good. I've got one other cool thing I'm going to do here. I've got moose lard. I'm going to be cooking today with the moose lard. So here's a quick note just to remind everybody. If you're transporting animal goods like this from one country to another, you've got to go through the proper and legal channels. What I recommend is if you're coming from Canada like I was, get with a taxidermist. I found a good taxidermist in Edmonton, and there's a bunch of other good ones, and they know just the right ways to get the animal matter, horns, hides and stuff like this through customs with the right permits. So make sure you do this all right. That's what I did. Let's let this grill heat up a little bit. I've got a good bag of largemouth bass that I'm going to do. So I'm going to fry that up in oil with some spices, wipe the plate clean, and then hit this back strap. I've got a lot of, actually this is tenderloin, a lot of little tenderloin cutlets here, venison, and we've got that spiced up with my new favorite spice after being in the Arctic, alderwood smoked sea salt. Alderwood smoked sea salt, literally, I can stick my nose in there and smell, and it just smells like I've got my head buried in my stack of jerky again, because that alder smoke does so good at flavoring the meat. Paprika is good on the venison, and garlic. That's what I'm going to spice up the venison with. So I'm going to let the grill heat up here just a little bit, get the fish on there, then get the venison on there, but I'm going to start catching you up on everything while I chew this piece of jerky. And it's getting stuck in my teeth again. And I remember. Before I begin, I want to say a huge thank you to Team Timber. I've heard that it's a thing, and I'm pretty blown away. I'm blown away by all the messages that I've received saying I was on Team Timber. I was really sad or mad when you decided to leave. And it's really humbling, and I'm just really grateful for all of you guys. So a big shout out and a big thank you to Team Timber before I do anything. Now let's get right into these questions. First question, and this is not really about episodes 11 and 12, it's about all season. What was the biggest hole in my skill repertoire? What was the thing that I got there and I was shocked because I couldn't do, or I didn't know how to do, or wasn't very experienced in? Without a doubt, it was cooking. Cooking is a bushcraft skill. And I never thought of that before. I've hated cooking all my life. So this is new for me. This is a result of Alone. I bought a $100 grill when I got back, and I said, I'm going to incorporate this into my life, and I'm going to cook. I'm going to learn to cook. Cooking was the biggest hole in my bushcraft skills. Speaking of which, I think I'll take some time to get this fish on there. It's about the right temperature. Now I'm going to cook the venison in moose lard, but I'm going to cook the fish in a little oil. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just get a little oil on that plate. Get actually a lot of it on there. Let that heat up a bit. Levi, do you want to come help me?
Sure.
Why don't you do this? You can stand over here and do this phone right here.
Uh-huh.
You can film on the grill right here, like that. My son Levi, he likes it that I'm learning to cook. He's going to help me with one of the phones. So these are just bass fillets. I'm going to get them on here and then put my spices on there that I like. The thing is not level.
I'm putting the plate on the mustard so the Gray Jays won't get it.
So the Gray Jays won't get it. I just got that. Good call, buddy. Good call. Just going to get a lot of this fish on there. Now, on alone, for at least 50 days straight, I fried some pike in moose lard. At least a couple pieces this size. Now, you know I was over rationing, trying to stretch it out too long. So I would fry little pieces. I'd take a piece like this and make that last for a day, cut it up into about 4. But I felt like no one ever ate so good on alone in all their life. I was pretty spoiled. Each day in the evening, I would take moose lard, get it in my pot. It'd be sizzling and crackling like this. Now, of course, I didn't have any salt to put on it, but I'd get it going in the lard, and I would fry that stuff, and it would feel so good. So very, very good. What I like to put on fish like bass, I just learned this from one of my buddies. First, I'll start off with a little salt. Just get a little salt on there. The next thing is a Thai-style sweet chili sauce. So with the Thai-style sweet chili sauce, it's basically a rub. You get it all in there, rub that stuff down. It provides a gooey base so that your lemon pepper will stick onto it. That's about it. And the last thing that you sprinkle in that orange chili sauce is lemon pepper. This lemon pepper is a little solidified. There we go. And then just grill it about 5 minutes on each side. I'll close that up for a minute. All right, second question about alone. Why didn't I boil the jerky? Now, you want some? Mm-hmm. Yeah, buddy. Grab a chunk. There's a piece of dried pike in here still.
Actually.
Just noticed that. Yeah. It's hard, chewy, but it's still good. Still good. So why didn't I boil the jerky? I did boil the jerky all the time. Boiled a lot of it. Cut up into little pieces and boiled it. Pounded it with my axe and boiled it. So I've got this axe right here, my alone axe. And I'd take this axe and on my stump in my shack, I'd pound some jerky up until it was just pulp and eat that, and then sometimes boil that as well. But why did it stay painful then? It's because it's not really a fault of the jerky. My teeth are just really problematic. I saw a dentist in India quite a few years ago, and I had to have a root canal done, emergency. And he really worked my teeth over, ruined a number of teeth around where I had the root canal done, and ever since then my teeth have been just super problematic, super painful. And you know, it's not really a fault of the jerky. With the jerky, it would get softer, but the meat would still remain really fibrous, and those fibers would get packed up in, and I'd always be picking at it with sticks and with a piece of rabbit bone trying to get it out, but it would press apart on those teeth. It was really hard to get out because my teeth are tight. So it just stayed that way, and it's not really a fault of the jerky, it's just my problematic teeth. Let's go ahead and switch this fish. Here, Levi. It's looking pretty good. So that answers the question about the jerky. The next question I always get about the moose, about the meat, is that how much of it's spoiled. And I love it that we're all invested in nature and seeing it used wisely. We don't want to see it spoil. So I've got good news for you. None of that thing's spoiled. I'd say a few handfuls, a couple handfuls like this big, I kept fresh for as long as I could. And then a few handfuls like that ended up going bad. And then I used it for pike bait. But that entire thing, except for those bits I used for bait at the end, I smoked that thing, and I'm pleased to tell you, a magnificent animal like that, we didn't let it spoil. I was all set to leave the competition if I felt like I couldn't get that animal preserved, that I couldn't get it smoked and preserved. If that animal was going to go to waste, I was leaving the competition to save that meat. So that's the answer to that question about the moose meat. And so how much jerky was left? That's the next question. How much jerky is left after the whole competition? There was a pretty good pile. I've still got a stash here. I brought jerky home and I've been eating on it, and that's about all that I've got left right now. You saw me and Levi chewing on this jerky just a minute ago, and I ration it pretty good because it's just so good. It takes me back to the experience so much. So how much was left? Several pounds. I don't know, a pretty good bag of it. Pretty good stash of it in my backpack was still there at the end. And so I hadn't run out of it. Hadn't run out. Ooh, nice, fresh, steaming grilled fish. Now here's a really important question that I'm eager to answer for you guys finally. Real important question. The whole experience, the whole thing of alone, the weight that I lost, everything, would it have been better or worse without the moose? Would it have been easier or harder without the moose? I'll tell you straight up, it would have been easier, and I would have lost less weight without the moose. It might shock you. You say, how can that be? It's big game. 2 reasons. First reason is I was clearly over rationing, not gorging on that moose meat like I should have. But my concern was that I would get impacted in my guts with just suddenly switching and having that much red meat and no vegetables to go along with it. No greens of any type. That's a difficulty of my terrain there. And I was afraid to eat too much of it at once. That's one reason I was over rationing. Another reason just because I was afraid and trying to make it last too long. So I could have been eating more. But that's the first reason why it would have been easier without the moose. Second reason is simply because of the difficulties that were faced with the moose after I got it on the ground. I've already told you guys how it took an entire week to get it smoked, butchered, hauled. I walked close to 40 miles probably with all the meat hauling and all that kind of stuff. Had to finish building the shelter and smoke all that stuff in there, process all that. And I had to do it so diligently to keep it from spoiling that I almost didn't even eat for that whole week. And that's where I lost my weight. That's where I lost it all. Now, during that time, it would have been easier, it would have been easier as a whole to do the whole thing without the moose. And here's the reason. I was catching fish like crazy during that time. I'm going to show you guys something right here. There's my axe right here. I put a mark on the handle for every animal and fish that I caught. This is my fish marks right here. These are the marks of 52 fish. In addition to the moose, I got 52 fish. And I could have got a whole lot more if I'd have just been fishing instead of smoking the moose meat and all that kind of stuff. Could have got a whole lot more. So that's a big difference maker. The fish were biting hard during that time. During the time that I smoked the moose and all that kind of stuff, couple of weeks there, I think I could have got 30 more fish. Maybe. Who knows? But I think I could have got about 30 more fish during that time. And with smoking them, I've still got smoked fish too. I've still got smoked fish here. There's one little piece of smoked pike still. 2 little pieces of smoked pike. You can see it because it's a lot lighter colored down here in this jar of jerky. But what was the biggest gift from the moose? This is incredible. The biggest gift from the moose is what I'm about to cook with right now. In this bag is the last bit of moose lard. It's pure, fluffy white. Oh my goodness. A little bit of black specks in there, because it's probably been in my cooking pot in the Arctic once and got a few specks in there from rendering it. It's beautiful, beautiful, pure. And this is my last bit of it, and I'm cooking a meal with it right now to share with you guys. I'm going to put it on this hot plate, get that lard melting down, and oh my goodness, I'm excited about this. No, don't fall. So this moose lard was the greatest gift from the moose. I probably had 15 or 20 pounds of it total, and here's what transpired. I told you that it'd be easier without the moose and just with doing fish. But later on in the winter, this answers a couple questions at once. You know my feet got really cold. Oh, man. I can still save some of that because I don't need quite that much. This is what kept happening to me in the Arctic. I kept being like, that's a meal's worth. And then I'm like, it's still half there. So I'd let it solidify, put it back in my birch bark containers. This is what's hanging in those birch bark containers that you see dangling in my cabin sometimes. A big, like a little log with birch bark with little wooden plugs in the end. I've still got half of this lard. I didn't expect that. I thought I'd use all this up. But I've still got half of this lard right now. That's the greatest gift of the moose. And that is why, reveal right here, I gained weight toward the end of the show. See, my feet started getting really cold, as you know, in the days, late 60s and the 70s out there. It was getting so cold, it started getting below zero, and I lost my circulation. I couldn't keep my feet well, and I started to think that my feet were getting a little frostbite. What happened was I would take that extra lard, just like what I had right now, and I would keep it in my pot and heat it up, and I would just drink that stuff. And I would savor it. Oh, it was so good. I didn't do that for the longest time because I was over-rationing, and I was afraid of running out of everything. But as it wore on there, and I'm like, this lard isn't running out so fast, I just started drinking it. And I would drink half a cup or a cup of lard in one evening sometimes, through day like 75 and 76, 78, stuff like that. And that caused me to gain weight back. Now, that's hardly been done on Alone before. I think Jordan Jonas gained weight back while he was there, late in the season. But I started to gain weight back. And to me, that's a pretty big deal. But it's all because of that moose lard. But the next effect of the moose lard was that my circulation came back. I would notice a huge difference after being all day struggling with my feet. And then at supper time, I drank a half a cup of hot moose lard. And for the next day, 2 days, my feet were okay. It was still a hassle. It was cold. I'm not used to it like William is, but the feet were okay. So that's why when they have that last medical check and come out there, that I'm telling them about my feet, and I'm like, hey, they were fine last night. It's because of that moose lard, the greatest gift of the moose right there. This cat's the cat that's been in my videos photobombing me for a while. This is Kit Kat, and he's looking at this deer meat, and he wants some. Eat it, cat. He doesn't like the spices. He doesn't like spices on his venison. All right. This meat is looking so good. So good, so good. Yeah. Now, in that incident where you see me put the fish out there on the stump for the wild critters, I felt very deep conviction about that incident because I was trying to raise awareness for two very specific situations, and it didn't make the edit. I guess it can't. But I listed Afghanistan and Burma, where I know for a fact that children are starving every day. Children are hungry and starving, and so many days, thousands of children don't get a meal. And so I was very specific about those situations because it's very much on my heart, and I thought that I can represent them a little bit. And I was sitting there with that fish, feeling like I wanted it so much, to almost to an extent that it was wrong. And I thought, what could be a greater purpose here? So I think that the situations and the countries that I'm trying to raise awareness for, they couldn't make the edit. Probably they can't put those names in there. And so because of that, I probably came across as a little confusing, maybe, with what that was intended to be all about, So that's the situation with that fish offering. And that was just about the last of my fish. I think it was the second to last fish that I had, maybe the last fish I had, I can't remember. So it was a pretty big deal. The last question is a two-part question that I'm going to answer, and it's about the shelters. I get a lot of questions that hover around this topic, and so I think I'll just try to deal with all the questions as a whole. Shelters, fires, and sleeping bags that play a part in the roles from day 60 through 84. A lot of people are really noticing that William's shelter doesn't have an indoor fire, and at night and stuff like that, and they're like, well, that's a different strategy than what Timber and Dub have. But it really isn't. There's kind of a misunderstanding about what the shelters are set up to be like and what the fires are intended to be like. My shelter and Dub's shelter we go to sleep at night, and we don't sit there throwing wood in all night. Now, if I couldn't have kept my feet well without getting frostbite, I would have sat there throwing wood in all night. That was my last resort. But as it stands, I'm not sitting there throwing wood in the fire all night, and I'm pretty sure that Dub isn't either. And what that means is the fires go out, it gets just as cold in there as it's going to get, and it's down to your sleeping bag. It really comes down to your sleeping bag, and that's pretty much how it's done in cold weather. I've done a lot of mountaineering before, and it's been negative 30 and windy up on mountains and stuff, and you don't have a fire at all, ever, besides just a little jet burner to boil your noodles with, you know, and cook some food and stuff. And it boils down to your sleeping bag. So that's William's strategy, but I want to say that it's basically Dub's strategy and my strategy as well, because we're not sitting there throwing wood in the fire all night. You'll see the clips where we are in our shelters at night, where we wake up, there's no fire, and so it's just as cold as it's going to be in there. It's frozen solid in our shelters, but it comes down to the sleeping bag. And that brings me down to the only gear item that I would really change after being on alone, is that I took a really bad sleeping bag. I would have traded, it was supposed to be rated to like negative 60. I'm not going to mention the brand here because this is really bad PR for them. It's supposed to be rated down to like negative 60, but I would have traded it in a heartbeat for my 0 degree bag from home. And it was pretty drafty, and I should have been on to this. I should have noticed it before I launched, that around the zipper that air would get in, and that's why I start struggling with frost nip. And it really boils down to sleeping bag. I would have much rather had a better sleeping bag, even if it was rated only down to 0 degrees. Would have been a better choice. Let's check this meat one more time. Guys, I think a lot of this meat is done. We can about start taking it off.
Ooh, that looks good.
So with the shelters, you know, nobody's really got their shelter strategy to where they're going to try to stay warm all night with a fire without relying on their sleeping bag. The fires go out, it gets just as cold, and it comes down to the sleeping bag. And that was a mistake I made, was the sleeping bag I took not being a very good one. If you message me, I'll tell you what brand it is, and I'll unrecommend it. The strategy with the fire in the shelters then, for me, was to be able to have it warm throughout the day while I cook. And you'll see me able to strip off in there, you know, and to be pretty warm throughout the day, even with my door half open. And it stayed really warm. So the strategy was to be able to warm up really well all throughout the day, into the night while I'm sitting up carving or doing crafts and stuff like that in the cold days, and to have it really toasty and warm in there right up to push it through that darkness to where I don't have to sleep through the entire darkness, and then to warm my feet up real good and get in the sleeping bag. So that, I feel like that would have been perfect if I'd have just had the sleeping bag that could have battled the cold that set in once it was 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., 6. Remember, at 7, 8, 9, and 10 a.m., it's still pitch black during those days. And during that hours is when it would get really cold, below 0 in there. And that's when you feel it if you don't have a pretty decent sleeping bag. So that's kind of how the strategies are playing out with the shelters and the fire. You know, you don't have to have a fire in your shelter to sleep through the night. That's down to your sleeping bag. But if you can have a fire in your shelter, you can be pretty comfortable and crafty throughout the day and do a lot of things that are enjoyable. And that really helps. That really helped me with my mental status, with my mental game. So I think that's a pretty good description of what's going on with the shelters and with the fires and all that. Last note. What about my toes with the frostbite then? The frostbite, which turned out to be frost nip, it's just frost nip basically, where the skin is kind of gray and waxy and you start to lose feeling in it, and it doesn't have very good capillary refill. Didn't turn out to be that big of a deal, and I've told you why already with the lard that we're cooking with, because with that lard, drinking that lard really put the circulation back into me for a few of those really cold nights. And there was an intensely cold spell on day 80, 79, 80, 81, and it got down to right on to 30 below 0. I don't know why that number's not on screen, but it got there. And I got right through those cold days without getting the frost nip any worse because I was drinking that lard. And that lard really brought my circulation back up a bit, and it saved me. So that's why it didn't turn out to be a very big deal. That's why on that last medical check that you'll see, they say, how are your feet? And I say, well, last night they were okay. Because that's when I started drinking that lard, a half a cup or a cup of warm lard right before bedtime. And that did it. That's why I started gaining weight back. And I gained a few pounds back just before exiting the show. So, my feet are okay. No worries there. They didn't even peel. You know, I was really fell prey to a little bit of fear about that when I started losing the feeling there. And I think that's one of the things I'd take my hat off to William for. William never had any fear about any of that kind of stuff. And even at base camp there, he had a lot more of that frost nippy stuff than I had, but didn't bother him. He's like, yeah, he knew he was fine. You know, he's seen it all. He's seen it all before. So, anyways, I think that's enough questions for today. I'm going to take the venison off. Keep in mind, with this moose lard, it is going to be delicious. It is going to be delicious, and it's looking just about perfect. Venison tenderloin and moose lard, guys. I'll answer more questions, at least a couple more videos about these last episodes. But for now, I'm going to go eat some of this fish and some of this backstrap. Moose lard, baby! And I've still got enough for one more meal, surprisingly.